They laughed at the old black man sitting alone at the bar, called him a fake veteran, a liar, a nobody. But when a young Navy SEAL spotted the faded tattoo on his forearm, everything stopped. The air froze. The room fell silent. Because that wasn't just any ink, it was the mark of a legend, a ghost from a war no one dared speak of. And what happened next, it shook the entire military to its core. This isn't just a story about recognition. It's about truth buried in blood, a betrayal decades old. And the moment the real Reaper won came back to finish what they thought they'd erased forever. They looked at me like I didn't belong. The bar wasn't fancy, just a local joint off Highway 83 dusty floors, and neon lights flickering like they were drunk themselves. I came in for a burger and a glass of iced tea. That's all. But the second I walked in, their eyes followed me like I was tracking mud over white carpet. And then he said it loud enough for the whole place to hear. Who let the fake vet in? Laughter. A low chorus of it. 3 men at the pool table turned around. A woman in a server's apron snorted. Even the bartender didn't blink, just kept wiping down the same glass he'd been scrubbing for 10 minutes. I froze. My hand instinctively reached for the folded ID in my back pocket, but I stopped myself. I'd been down this road before. If they didn't believe the look in your eyes, no paper would change their mind. They didn't know who I was. But that's the point, isn't it? I used to think the uniform protected me. That once you wore the stars and stripes on your shoulder, once you bled into foreign soil for a flag that didn't always wave back at you, you earned something. Not respect, maybe, but space. A place. That illusion died slowly over the years, and tonight it burned. I took a seat in the corner booth anyway. Back to the wall. Habit. Old reflexes from another life. The waitress didn't bother to greet me. "You want something, or are you just hiding from the rain?" she asked, chewing gum like she was mad at it. "Burger, no cheese, iced tea, unsweet." She rolled her eyes and walked off. No pen, no pad. Just a memory trained to ignore people like me. It was late. Maybe close to 10. I could hear the hum of the TV overhead playing an old football rerun, but no one was watching. Most of them were watching me. Then the door swung open. Boots hit the floor hard. Confident, rhythmic steps. You could tell a lot about a man by the way he walked into a room. This guy wasn't drunk, wasn't local either. Tall, clean-shaven, sun-bleached hair cropped tight, broad frame under a fitted bomber jacket. I didn't need a second look. SEAL. I spotted them like satellites spot heat. He walked straight to the bar and ordered something simple water, if you can believe it. Everyone went quiet for a moment. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. He didn't say much, just scanned the place once, then turned and caught my eye, and froze, dead still. His glass stayed halfway to his lips. The bartender said something. The guy didn't respond, just stared. Then, slowly, his eyes dropped to my right forearm. I didn't realize my sleeve had slipped. I'd pushed it up a little because of the heat. My skin, dark and wrinkled from decades in the sun, revealed just a flash of ink. An old tattoo. Faded. Nothing special. But he saw it, and he froze like he'd seen a ghost. That tattoo wasn't one of those trendy tribals or stylized anchors. It was a symbol. Old school, etched in country. A hawk clutching a trident wrapped in fire inked on a battlefield in '68. There were maybe a dozen of us who had it. Maybe less now. Maybe just me. He whispered something. I read his lips. "Is that Reaper 1?" I didn't answer. He stepped toward me like a man walking toward something sacred or something terrifying. I watched him closely. There was no threat in his eyes, only disbelief. "You served in Pubai 68, he asked quietly. My heart hit my ribs like a snare drum. I nodded. His throat tightened. "My grandfather. He talked about you." And just like that, the room shifted. The men by the pool table stopped laughing. The waitress stood frozen mid-step, and the bartender finally set down his damn glass. "You're that Reaper One?" the young SEAL asked again, voice barely holding together. I leaned forward, hands folded calmly. I said, silence. For a moment, it was like time folded in on itself. The decades between us evaporated, and in that smoky bar with its cracked vinyl booths and bad lighting, I wasn't an old man anymore. I was the phantom they'd all heard about. The name whispered in operations, the black and white photo tucked into faded folders stamped classified. And then he stood at attention, not like some performative salute, but like he needed to. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking, "it's an honor." I didn't know what to say. It had been so long since anyone meant that. He turned around and faced the room. "Who called him fake?" he said, loud and sharp. No one answered. He stepped closer to the pool table. I asked a question. One of the men muttered, "Just a joke." "Say it again," the SEAL snapped. "So I can see if it's still funny." They didn't. The bartender cleared his throat and tried to lighten the air. "Hey, now, let's not start." The SEAL turned to him. "He saved your freedom before you were born. Show him some damn respect." Then he did something I hadn't seen in years. He pulled out his phone, walked over, and asked for a photo with me. Not for social media, for memory. He said his grandfather would want to see it. And in that moment, as the camera clicked and the flash went off, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, but I knew this wasn't over. Because if he recognized the tattoo, someone else would too. Someone I wasn't ready to meet again. Not yet. Not here. Not in this dusty little bar on a forgotten stretch of Texas. But fate has a way of dragging truth into the light. And that tattoo. It was just the beginning. They used to call me a ghost. Not because I was quiet or elusive, but because most men who saw me in the jungle never lived long enough to tell the story. They gave me the call sign Reaper One the day I walked out of an ambush in the A Shao Valley, carrying 2 men on my shoulders. My team was gone. Vaporized. I don't know how I survived, and I never tried to explain it. I didn't need medals. I didn't need a ceremony. I just needed to make it out. That was a long time ago. Now, I'm just another old man, sitting alone in a small Texas town where time moves slow and people forget fast. But that night, after the SEAL saw my tattoo and left with shaking hands and a quiet promise to come back with someone I couldn't sleep. Something had been stirred up in the dark. Something I buried deep, and for good reason. I sat at my kitchen table with nothing but a black and white photo in my hand. It was faded and creased from years tucked in my wallet. 4 young men, camouflage uniforms soaked in sweat and jungle grime. One of them, me, stood slightly apart. Not because I wanted to. Because even then, they knew I wasn't like the rest. The man beside me, arm slung over my shoulder, had a grin that could punch through steel. Lieutenant Marcus Blaze Kendrick, my commanding officer, my best friend, my brother. He died 2 days after that photo was taken. Left his blood on my chest and his last words in my ear. "You bring 'em home, Reap. You bring 'em all home." But I didn't, and that guilt still burns. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing had happened. Coffee, old boots, a walk to the VFW hall where mostly no one talks about war. It's safer that way. Memories bite hard. I didn't expect the black SUV. Didn't expect the man stepping out of it either. The SEAL was back, but he wasn't alone this time. Behind him stood a man I hadn't seen in 40 years. Major Victor Hale. Except he wasn't a major anymore. He was in full dress blues, adorned polished metals shining like teeth. His posture was like granite. Time hadn't bent him much. His hair was steel gray now, but the eyes still sharp enough to cut a lie in half. I froze. He stepped forward, slowly, eyes locked on mine like he'd been rehearsing this confrontation for decades. "Reaper 1, he said. I stayed still. "You disappeared," he said. "After the fire team extraction, after the hearings, you dropped off the map." "I didn't disappear," I replied. "I just got tired of being someone the government remembered only when they needed to clean up blood." He exhaled through his nose. "I tried to find you. We all did. There was a report. After the testimony, they said you walked away from Arlington in full uniform and vanished." I did. "Why?" I took a long breath. "Because Blaze died. Because no one believed what happened. Because they tried to paint us as ghosts, not to honor us, but to erase us." Victor looked down, silent. The SEAL beside him didn't speak either. Then he reached into his coat and pulled something out. It was a dossier. He laid it on the picnic table beside me. "I need you to see this." I opened it. Photographs. Grainy black and white satellite captures maps marked in red. But it was the last image that punched me in the chest like a steel boot. A man, standing beside a burned-out convoy in the Middle East, wearing a mask, and on his exposed forearm, my tattoo, but not a copy. Exact. Even the scar across the eagle's wing was the same. "This isn't possible," I whispered. Victor nodded. I thought the same. But this was 3 months ago. We picked it up from intercepted drone footage. Intel says he's moving through the black zones recruiting ex-special forces destabilizing warlords' rogue cells. The problem is, people call him Reaper. I looked up. That's not me. "I know," Victor said. "But whoever he is, he knows you. And he's using your name like a flag of war." Silence fell over the table like a dropped anvil. Then Victor said something I didn't expect. "We want you to come back." I laughed. Hard. "Come back, I'm 73. I live in a one-bedroom house with a busted AC and arthritis in both knees." He didn't smile. "This isn't about active duty. This is about closing a chapter. He's not just using your name. He's trying to erase your legacy and write his own." I shook my head. "I'm done." Then the SEAL stepped forward. The same one from the bar. He pulled up his sleeve, and there it was, another tattoo. Not mine, but close. Modeled after the same unit symbol. The hawk. The trident. The fire. "I wear this because of what you did," he said. "My grandfather was one of the men you carried out of that jungle. He told me stories of you when I was 5. When I was scared of the dark, he said, 'Don't worry. Reaper 1 watches the night.' I couldn't look at him. 'I joined the SEALs because of you,' he said. 'So did half of my unit.' You don't get to fade away, sir. Not while someone out there is poisoning the name you earned with blood." My hands trembled slightly. Not from age. From memory. I picked up the photo again. Blaze's grin stared back at me, and I knew this wasn't over. The war had come home wearing my face. It was time to find out who dared to call himself Reaper, and why. The wheels of the black SUV hummed against the asphalt as we left the town behind, headed toward a military intelligence compound, somewhere I hadn't been in decades. I hadn't said yes, not out loud, but I didn't have to. The second I saw that tattoo on the masked man's arm, I knew I wouldn't rest until I got answers. They say your past doesn't follow you, it waits for you, and mine had just caught up. Victor sat beside me, stone-faced, occasionally flipping through a tablet with mission files. The young SEAL, his name was Logan, drove in silence. His hands on the wheel were steady, but his jaw clenched whenever he glanced at me in the mirror. He had the eyes of a man raised on bedtime stories of blood and valor. I recognized the type. I'd trained them, once men who thought courage meant charging forward. But real bravery, it's carrying the truth even when it breaks you. What do you know so far? I finally asked. Victor looked over. We've intercepted 5 operations connected to him. Arms deals, mercenary contracts, high-level sabotage. But what's strange is, he doesn't kill civilians. In fact, he rescues them. My brow furrowed. He's building a reputation, Victor continued. Among rogue factions, he's becoming a myth. They call him the True Reaper, the one the Pentagon buried. I laughed bitterly. That sounds familiar. Victor nodded. It's more than just identity theft. He's weaponizing your legend. I turned to the window, watching the dry fields roll past. That tattoo. It's not just a symbol. It was a blood pact. There were only 6 of us who got it in Pubai. The ink was mixed with gunpowder from the same raid that killed Blaze. We made it together. There's no way anyone could replicate it without... My breath caught. Victor saw the look in my eyes. What he asked. I looked at him slowly. There were 6 of us. 4 died in country. One disappeared after Blaze. Victor leaned forward. Name, Curtis Drexler. Victor's lips tightened. Drexler went MIA. No, I said slowly. He went rogue. Drexler was the last man I saw with Blaze before he died. He was brilliant, a tactician with a mind sharp as razors. But war changed him. Twisted something inside. He started questioning orders, calling high command cowards. He blamed the system for Blaze's death. I thought I could talk him down. But the last mission went sideways, and he vanished. There were rumors he'd been picked up by a CIA Black Ops team. Others said he'd died in a failed extraction. I buried the memory. It was easier to believe he was gone. But now it all made sense. If anyone could fake the tattoo, it was Drexler, because he helped create it. We arrived at the compound just before dusk. It looked like a rundown warehouse, but inside it was buzzing with digital warfare screens, intel maps, satellite feeds, faces half lit by blue light. Soldiers behind keyboards. Victor took me into a briefing room. Logan followed. He pulled up a map. Pins and dates. Videos. Faces. But one clip played without sound, just cold visual truth. A convoy. Screams. Chaos. Then him. Drexler, older, leaner, but unmistakable. Eyes like molten steel. Tattoo blazing on his arm clearly shone to the drone. He looked up into the camera and raised 2 fingers to his temple. Salute. To me. Is that him? Victor asked. Yes, I whispered. That's Curtis Drexler. Logan exhaled hard. Why would he do this? I stared at the screen, fury building slowly. Because he thinks we forgot. Because he thinks the country we bled for turned its back on the men who didn't die, but didn't come home either. Victor said he's targeting the very institution he once swore to protect. I nodded. Because he believes it betrayed him. Later that night, alone in a dim bunk room, I stared at the ceiling. The sound of my heartbeat echoed louder than ever. Curtis had been my brother once. Not by blood, but by fire. I taught him how to breathe through fear, how to read the wind, how to make life and death calls without blinking. He was always quiet, but he listened to every word. And now he was using everything I taught him against the very world we swore to protect. I pulled the old photograph from my coat again. Blaze? Me? Drexler. I remembered the last thing Blaze said to me. Don't let the fire die in the wrong hands. I failed him, but not this time. The next morning, Victor briefed the team. They had intel on Drexler's next move, an off-grid operation in Sierra Leone. A child trafficking ring tied to rogue ex-military contractors. Drexler had been there 2 days ago, freed the kids, burned the camp, left a message spray-painted in red. The ghosts you made are coming home. Victor looked at me. We're assembling a small team. Infiltration recon only. But if he's there, I'm going, I said. No one's asking you to. I am going, I repeated. Victor paused, then nodded. Logan stepped forward. Then I go too. I looked at him. You sure about that, son? He held my gaze. I was trained by men who were trained by legends. It's time I fight beside one. I smiled for the first time in a long while. Then let's go find my ghost. The jungle never forgets. We dropped into Sierra Leone under cover of darkness. No welcome party. Just the roar of a black hawk slicing through thick cloud cover, and then sudden dead silence as the blades stopped spinning. My boots hit the soil like they were meeting an old friend, damp, heavy breathing. I hadn't been in a combat zone for decades, but my body remembered. Some things never leave you. Victor stayed behind to coordinate with intel. Logan was beside me dressed in silent tactical gear, his eyes scanning like radar. He'd never been in a jungle like this. You could see it in the way his head turned just a little too fast, his trigger finger hovering a little too close. But his breathing was calm, disciplined. I'd seen men twice his age fall apart in softer terrain. He was holding it together. We moved through the foliage without speaking. Our guide, a local with eyes like polished coal, led us down a broken trail toward the old compound. It had once belonged to a mining outfit. Now it was a shadow playground. Rumors said Drexler had been there, shut it down, rescued, trafficked children, and vanished before the local militias could even regroup. But he didn't cover his tracks. He wanted to be found. We reached the edge of the camp just before sunrise. The jungle fell away to reveal twisted metal structures, makeshift shacks, and the blackened husks of trucks burned to the frame. Smoke still lingered in the air, thick and oily. And then I saw it spray-painted across the side of an old tin wall. Reaper still walks. It wasn't a message for the world. It was for me. Logan whispered, "This doesn't feel like a battlefield. It feels like a shrine." He was right. It was too clean, too precise. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. No civilian casualties. No chaos. Just surgical destruction. Then Logan froze. Movement, 11 o'clock. I followed his gaze. A man, alone, standing in the open, unarmed, wearing a hood, sleeves rolled up. The tattoo on his arm caught the light like fire. It was Drexler, older, weathered, his beard now dusted with gray. But his posture still sharp, still calculated. He stared at me across the open space like we were picking up a conversation paused 40 years ago. I stepped forward. So did he. We met in the center of the compound, silent sentinels of a forgotten war. Neither of us spoke, until he did. "I knew you'd come." His voice was deeper now, slower, like gravel wrapped in silk. "You made sure I did," I said. He nodded. "They said you were dead." I let out a breath. "They said the same about you." A smile tugged at his mouth, but it never reached his eyes. guess we're both hard to kill. I looked around. You always leave calling cards like this. He tilted his head. It's not a message. It's a reminder. Of what? He looked me dead in the eyes. That the system failed us. The silence between us stretched like a wire. He continued. You know it too. You saw what they did after Blaze died. The cover-up. The mission redacted. We were erased. Ghosts in a country we bled for. You're right, I said. But we survived. No, he growled. You survived. I became what they tried to hide. I took the pain they gave us and made it into something useful. I stepped closer. You're not helping anyone, Curtis. You're playing God. Wearing a name that isn't yours anymore. I helped those children, he snapped. I've helped more people than any of those bureaucrats in D.C. ever will. I don't need permission to fight for what's right. Logan moved behind me, rifle half raised. Drexler saw it. The young one doesn't trust me. He's smart, I said. But you do, he replied. I hesitated. Part of me, I admitted. But I also know where this road ends. And it's not in justice. It's in fire. He smiled. Maybe fire is what we need. A rustle behind the tree line stopped us both. Weapons cocked. Logan spun. Voices. Footsteps. Victor's voice crackled in my comms. Reaper heads up. Militia cell closing in. 12 men. Armed. Hostile. Drexler raised his hands. They're not mine. I looked at him. You sure? Positive. Then bullets ripped through the compound. The jungle exploded. Logan tackled me to the ground as rounds screamed overhead. Drexler vanished into the smoke like he was born of it. I scrambled behind a rusted-out truck drawing breath through grit and dust. We were pinned. Fall back to extraction point, Victor barked in my ear. Bird inbound in 5. I scanned the chaos. Negative. We've got wounded, 2 local scouts hit. Logan returned fire calm and precise. But my eyes were on the smoke, on Drexler. And then, like a ghost, he reappeared, carrying one of the injured scouts over his shoulder. He dropped the man near me, blood streaking his arms, and without a word, vanished again. That's when it hit me. He wasn't running from justice. He was trying to prove something, not to the world. To me, back on the chopper wind whipping through the cabin, I held the scout's hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Logan sat across from me, bruised, bloodied, silent. Victor met us at the base. What the hell happened out there? He demanded. I handed him the scout's satchel. Inside, a flash drive, recovered by Drexler, with detailed information on the trafficking network. Evidence. Justice. Proof. I looked at Victor. He's not trying to destroy the system. Then what is he doing? I stared at the horizon where the jungle met firelight. He's trying to build a new one. There are things you carry from war, memories, scars, nightmares. But some things you bury so deep you convince yourself they never happened, until they rise. I sat alone in the briefing room, the flash drive Drexler recovered burning a hole in my palm. Victor and the intel crew had already started decrypting it. Names, coordinates, photographs. But one folder was labeled differently. Operation Phoenix, red level clearance. I knew that name, and I knew exactly what I hoped never to see again. Victor sat down beside me. He'd been quiet since our return. It's real, he said, breaking the silence. All of it. I nodded. I know. What I don't understand is why he gave it to us. Because he wanted me to see it. Victor hesitated. There's more. You should look at this. He tapped the tablet and brought up a video. It started with a grainy frame Vietnam 1968. The familiar terrain of Phu Bai. The camera panned shakily toward a small base camp. But it wasn't American. It was a black site, unmarked, illegal, the kind of place they said didn't exist. Then the feed jumped, a man being dragged through the mud, screaming, bleeding. It was Blaze. He wasn't killed in an ambush. He was executed. By our own. My throat closed. The next scene, documents signed, stamped approved by Pentagon brass. Operation Phoenix termination of potential compromise. Subject Lieutenant Kendrick Marcus. Code Blaze. Victor looked at me. They silenced him. He knew something about civilian casualties, about the cover-ups. The medals were fake. The mission was a lie. And we were the witnesses, I whispered. My hands shook as I gripped the table. They didn't just erase us. They killed him to keep it quiet. Victor exhaled slowly. This is why Drexler vanished. Why he went rogue. He found this before he disappeared. I stood, pacing the room, rage boiling under my skin. We've been fighting shadows for decades, and the real enemy was sitting in air-conditioned rooms in D.C. Victor said nothing. There was nothing to say. But Logan entered the room then, eyes wide. You need to see this. He brought up another screen. It was an intercepted message, encrypted, from Drexler. To me, it read, You finally see it now, don't you? They murdered Blaze. They painted you a ghost so no one would listen. But I listened. I kept the fire alive. I've been waiting for you to remember. Now you have a choice: burn with them, or rise with me. That night I sat under the stars, the sky a vast and empty witness. I thought of Blaze, his laugh, his courage, the way he believed in something greater than medals. They killed him to protect a lie, and I helped bury the truth. But not anymore. Victor approached quietly. We'll go public, he said. This will bring them down. Senators, generals, even the president if it has to. I nodded. But that's not what this is really about, is it? He asked. No, it's about him. Drexler didn't want revenge, I said slowly. He wanted me to carry the truth, to finish what Blaze started. Victor nodded grimly. Then we need to find him. Now, we tracked Drexler through a contact in Nairobi, a journalist who had been following rumors of a rogue ex-SEAL protecting displaced villages across East Africa. We flew in under UN cover. The village was small, hidden in the valleys, guarded not by weapons, but by stories. Drexler was already waiting. He stood in the shade of a broken bell tower, arms folded. No weapons, no soldiers, just the weight of everything we'd both carried for far too long. I knew you'd come, he said. I saw it all, I replied. And now you understand. I nodded. He looked away into the hills. I didn't want to be the Reaper. You made that name mean something. But they turned it into a ghost story. So I became the ghost. You don't have to be anymore, I said. We can tell the world. He shook his head. The world doesn't care, brother, but the people here, they do. They need protection, not politics. You're still fighting, I said. Just in a different war. He looked at me. A war for truth. I held out the flash drive. Let's finish it. Together. He stared at it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That night, Victor sent the entire dossier to every major global news agency. The story exploded. Classified missions, government-sanctioned assassinations, the truth behind Blaze's death. Senate hearings were launched. Protests flooded streets. Families of the forgotten came forward. The Reaper was no longer a ghost. He was a warning and a symbol. But Drexler, he vanished again, just like always. But this time I didn't chase him, because I finally understood. Some men weren't born to be seen. They were born to guard the night. They called it the Reaper hearing. Broadcast live. Prime time. Every major network tuned in. I never asked for the spotlight. I preferred shadows' silence. But when ghosts rise, they don't hide, they haunt. And this time, I wasn't haunting them alone. I stood outside the Capitol that morning in my old dress uniform, the medals dulled by time, the threads just slightly frayed. Not for show, for memory, for the men who couldn't walk in with me, blaze my unit, the forgotten. My spine straightened as the cameras clicked, and questions flew. Are you Reaper 1? Did the Pentagon order assassinations? Is the government hiding war crimes? I didn't answer. Not yet. Victor walked beside me now, stripped of his formal rank, but not his purpose. Logan trailed behind, not in uniform, but with a seal pin tucked into his collar. A symbol of a generation trained by myth, now living through revelation. We entered the chamber. The Senate subcommittee sat in a long arc, like gods on thrones, stiff suits, plastic smiles, polished fury. They pretended to be outraged, pretended they didn't already know. The chairwoman banged the gavel. Mr. John R. Wallace, also known as Reaper 1, you may begin. I stepped forward. The lights burned hot. The air was thin, but my voice was steady. I was 23 when I first killed a man for this country. I was told it was for freedom, for peace. But war changes definitions. Over time, I watched truth get replaced by convenience. And when that wasn't enough, by silence. Murmurs rippled through the room. I continued. Blaze Kendrick was murdered, not by an enemy combatant, but by our own command. Because he knew. Because he wouldn't stay quiet. I handed them the flash drive. This contains documents, videos, orders signed by people in this room. People who called me a ghost so I couldn't testify. People who buried my unit and let Drexler become a myth. The chairwoman raised an eyebrow. Are you accusing the Department of Defense of covering up war crimes? No, I said. I'm proving it. Victor stood and backed me, revealing satellite data, declassified memos, whistleblower statements. And then we played the video. The one where Blaze was dragged screaming. The one where the signature of a senior general marked the kill order. No one in the room moved, except Logan. He stood and removed the seal pin from his collar. This man, he said, pointing to me, taught generations of us what honor means. You taught us to obey. He taught us to think. And today, we choose him. The chamber exploded in chaos. Some senators called for investigations. Others walked out. But one man, a 4-star general, stood trembling. I signed that order, he said quietly. I was told Blaze was compromised. I see now. I was the compromised one. He removed his rank insignia and laid it on the table. Silence. The camera caught every moment. Across the country, screens glowed as Americans watched their myths fall and rise again in new form. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a ghost. I was a witness. And finally, a reckoning had begun. When the hearing ended, I stepped outside into the blinding light. Reporters swarmed, but I walked past them all, down the steps, toward the small crowd that had gathered, veterans, young SEALs, even civilians holding signs. Reaper 1 is not a ghost. Blaze didn't die in vain. A boy no older than 10 stepped forward. He held out a dog tag. My dad served. He said you saved his life. I took the tag. My fingers shook. What's your name? I asked. Marcus, he said. Like Blaze. I dropped to one knee and whispered, then your name carries a fire, son. Never let it go out. His eyes filled with something I recognized. Not admiration, inheritance. That night, Logan and I sat by the Potomac River, the Capitol dome behind us glowing like a monument to both truth and lies. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. I watched the water ripple with the wind. "It already has." He nodded, and then he asked, "What happened to Drexler?" I paused. He gave me the truth. He gave the world justice. And then he disappeared. Again. Logan smiled. "Do you think he's watching this?" I looked up at the stars. I think he's always been watching. 3 months passed. No more courtrooms, no more headlines. The hearings were over. The medals, some stripped, some returned. But none of it mattered to me. I went home, back to the quiet house on the edge of that Texas town, the one with creaky floors, faded flags, and the silence that used to suffocate me, but now gave me peace. People didn't mock anymore. The same bar where they once laughed now had a new photo on the wall. Me and Blaze. A plaque beneath it read, "He never stopped serving. I didn't need thanks. I just needed truth to outlive me." Victor retired. Quietly, but he still called once a week. Logan. He went back into the field, promoted, decorated, but he carried a copy of that flash drive with him encrypted in a drive hanging around his neck. He told me, so no one ever forgets again. I told him, it's not the proof that matters. It's the choice you make after you see it. He understood. One morning, just as the sun cut through the blinds, I got a letter. No stamp, no name. Just a folded piece of worn paper delivered in a plain envelope. Inside was a photo grainy taken from a distance, a small village, a boy smiling on the back of a motorcycle, and behind him, just barely visible in the shadows of a tree, was a man, tall, worn, hooded. The corner of his arm showed the faint outline of a tattoo, the Reaper. The note beneath it read, "The fire burns where it's needed. You lit it. I carry it. We're not ghosts. We're guardians." No signature, but I didn't need one. Drexler lived. Somewhere out there, he was still fighting the forgotten fight off the record under the radar beyond the noise. Not for vengeance anymore. Not even for justice. But for something deeper. Balance. He wasn't the villain. He wasn't the hero. He was the reckoning. And in some strange, silent way, he was my brother again. Weeks later, I visited Blaze. Not a grave. There was never a proper one. Just a stone I placed under an old oak tree at the back of my land. On it, I carved LT, Marcus Blaze Kendrick, still watching the fire. I sat there for hours, just listening to the wind. "Blaze," I whispered, "we did it. You were right. They tried to erase us, but the truth is louder, stronger. It didn't die in the jungle. It lived in us." A breeze passed through the branches. The leaves stirred. I took off my hat, closed my eyes, and for the first time in decades, I felt light. Not because the burden was gone, but because I'd stopped carrying it alone. Later, I found Logan had sent me something, a package. Inside was a small black coin, engraved with 2 words, "Never Forgotten," and a note for the man who became the myth and then became something greater, the truth. "Thank you, Reaper One." And so I live my days simply now. Morning walks, letters from young soldiers, families who tell me, "You helped bring my father home." A town that finally knows my name, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. I still visit the VFW hall sometimes, still keep a folded flag above my fireplace. But more than anything, I watch, not like a ghost, but like a guardian, Because somewhere out there, another young man is being told his service doesn't matter. Another truth is being buried. Another fire is flickering. And when it does, I'll be ready. Because Reaper 1 never stopped watching, and we're not done yet. Not until every forgotten hero is remembered. Not until every lie is silenced by the roar of truth. Not until the last ghost stands in the light and says, "I'm still here." In the end, Reaper 1 wasn't just a name or a call sign whispered in forgotten missions, it was a legacy. A legacy of courage sacrifice and the fire to stand for truth when the world turns its back. This story reminds us that real heroes don't ask to be seen. They rise when no one's watching. That justice doesn't always come wrapped in medals or headlines, but in memory, in action, in truth. To live with honor. To carry those who can't. To speak up when silence becomes betrayal. Because even in a world that forgets its own, the truth never forgets you. If this story moved, you don't just scroll. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories like this, true, emotional, and unforgettable. Comment below. What would you have done if you were Reaper 1? Share this story with someone who still believes in real honor. Hit the bell so you never miss the next story that shakes the silence. For Blaze, for Drexler, for every forgotten veteran still waiting to be remembered. We don't just tell stories here, we carry legacies.